Right, okay. That's a wonderful little quote which the voting group came up with from the councilman from Chandler, Arizona. And he basically described blockchain technology as a foundation of trust. And it ensures the integrity of data and making it easy to track and to guarantee the transactions beyond just, this is aimed at voting, but in fact, if you take blockchain to all of its size, it guarantees the stability and the integrity of information, and also the custody, which means if you change something, you can still change it like you can on the net, but you'll know who changed it. And at that point, I get into censorship and news, because that's what I've been in for the past 35 years. No, I mean kind, past 60 years. Dan from Gerard I'll let you introduce yourself real quick, and we'll stall a little bit till Bryan gets up here.
So my name is Dan Waslick. I'm from Gerard Blockchains. I'm currently the CTO there, and we're working to provide protocols that allow for a degree of mutability on immutable blockchains. And that, of course, as Gerard mentioned, is powered by court orders, which allows for traceability when it comes to how these changes within an immutable data structure have actually sort of been propagated through the network. So thanks for having me.
Good morning, everybody, and I apologize for coming in a couple minutes late. My name is Bryan Feinberg. I'm the CEO of Plato Technologies. We've built an AI-generated network that is driving content. We support a lot of countries due to our language translation, and we're strong advocates of censorship-resistant environments, as well as the ability to kind of validate content from its origin.
And Rafael, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Rafael Cordón. I am the CEO of SimpleProof. SimpleProof is a company that upholds information integrity. We do that by immutable record keeping and transparent verification. We recently worked with the government of Guatemala to safeguard all of the elections documents and the recent election that ended in August. And we did it on the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm also the chief cloud architect at ITZ Data, a AWS public sector partner.
And Dan, one more time, give us a summary.
Yep, so just again, I'm Dan Waslick from Gerard Blockchains. I'm the CTO there, and we provide protocols for integrating court systems with blockchain data structures, essentially.
I'm going to start the conversation off with a simple question. It says, can it get hacked? Both from Guatemala's elections and Dan's court system. How safe are we really? Dan?
Can you repeat that again?
Yep. Can the system get hacked? Can somebody get in there and change it?
There's kind of two answers to that. If there's sufficient sort of network computing power to secure it, and there's sufficient decentralization, that really helps to protect it from being hacked. But if it's one of these smaller networks that don't have a lot of computing power behind them, there are services out there that allow you to essentially rent computing power, and that is one vector that could potentially hack these sort of data structures. One way to sort of insulate from that is, instead of the general miners or everybody helping to validate certain types of transactions, you can have a limited number of validators that help to secure different types of transaction sets that can somewhat help to mitigate from the computing power sort of attack vector.
Can elections get hacked? Depending on the systems that are used for voting, Guatemala is all paper-based, so it's hard to hack paper. The Guatemalan system, and turns out a lot of the Latin American election systems work in paper, and it's the system is run by volunteer citizens. So, for example, Guatemala's system, there are 125,000 volunteers that work in the elections. Now, when the document is scanned, what we do is we take a fingerprint or the hash and store it using an open source protocol on the Bitcoin blockchain. Can Bitcoin be hacked? I can't say with complete certainty, but it hasn't happened. It's been 14 years. Bitcoin, we chose Bitcoin not because of it's a blockchain or whatever, but we view it as a system. And the Bitcoin system is, in my opinion, the most resilient information system ever created. And that's why we are using it.
Thought process, and as we see in the political realm, the ability to kind of change the mindset of people, especially as it's driving public policy. There's a lot of technology that's out there that, if used in a responsible way, can drive both awareness as well as, I would say, knowledge transfer. The validation of that data. Blockchain and certainly Bitcoin is not the only game in town in terms of being able to use cryptographic stenography techniques and being able to do watermarking. And it's going to be a very interesting next couple of years in terms of the way deep fake technologies start to come into play and can be misconstrued as truth, but in all reality, we know that it's not truth. And that can affect a lot of things, especially in terms of the direction that the electors and the election processes that are there can be swayed in that way, which isn't a direct hack, right? But it is also about a kind of a psychology that is going in now into the political process. And solutions need to be implemented across large environments like that, that can do the validation front to back that, you know, is the truth. And that can be done on a blockchain as well, especially in terms of, you know, some sort of record keeping.
I think people need to be able to find a source of truth. There's mental hacking, which is not necessarily the technical piece. From a technical standpoint, what needs to happen, I think it's on protocol development. We work with a protocol called Open Timestamps that was developed by Peter Todd, an early Bitcoiner. He works also with our company. He does consulting for us. And so we use that protocol to timestamp information on the Bitcoin blockchain. But it's not well known. It hasn't been implemented in a lot of places. We're like the first official government implementation of that protocol. So I think for now, it's on protocols more. And then once the protocols come, and that's the hard part, because investing in protocols, like, it's hard to, you know, make money off of HTTPS, right, or TCP/IP. But creating the protocols then enables people like our company, SimpleProof, to build applications on top that leverage those protocols and, you know, provide value to the end user. But first, we need the protocols.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Rafael's saying. Essentially, you know, Bitcoin provides that basis of a protocol foundation that allows for censorship-resistant communications. But one of the challenges with blockchain is that anybody can put any data they want on there. And so providing structures for organizations and businesses to allow for decentralized governance, essentially, over that data is what's going to become important as we go forward, because as we've seen with Bitcoin, there's already a bunch of questionable content on the Bitcoin blockchain that is there forever now, because, you know, you can't edit Bitcoin data. And if you look at something like ordinals or NFTs today, that also is a sort of immutable data format. And if bad actors come in, or even just people who are looking to kind of stir the pot, come in and put copyrighted material on the Bitcoin blockchain or other blockchains, any ledger is susceptible to this kind of stuff, or they put trademarked material on there, that's something that we need to have good constructs for moderating. Otherwise, these protocols can start to become sort of overwhelmed with this sort of garbage data, and I think it serves to sort of devalue their core value proposition. And so that's something that I see a lot of innovation happening around today in the space, but I think we still have like a lot of work to do.
I'll pick up on that. Bryan and gang, how do we deal with the copyright and trademarked information that gets out on the net and gets out on the blockchain? How do we monitor? And how do we pay for it?
Well, I think it really starts at kind of the tier one media level. responsibility needs to be taken to be able to ensure the credibility in those copyrights. But the way information moves today and the way that AI is there to essentially spin content, say the same exact thing in a different way, the AI that's available now can actually detect not whether or not there was an infringement there, but the level of that infringement through a simple scan on that content. This is now kind of wreaking a certain amount of confusion in Google's universe in terms of kind of the gateways they have set up for SEO and the ability to kind of use search in, you know, kind of in an old-fashioned way, as we see now information that is going through ChatGPT, and it goes back to the origin of where that data is coming from and the validation of it. But there is a lot of infringement that goes on. And if you look at Thomson Reuters over the course of the last week, their litigation team has been very, very busy at trying to address this and are going after not the small publishers like us, but the big networks that are facilitating the, let's say, the reuse of that content in, an individual way. So I think there needs to be guardrails there, but at the same time, we can't, create an impediment for the technology to be able to be used in both with efficacy and at the same time with truth that can be stored and can be referenced if necessary.
So what's the impact of chat on information and censorship? Rafael? Or Dan?
I'm really not an AI person. I only work with blockchain stuff. So I have I don't think I could answer that question. We work with public documents. So elections, for example, is information that the general public needs to know about. Patent information, court sentences, Freedom of Information Act requests, that type of public information that should be public and should be accessible to anyone, and anyone should be able to verify in a trustless manner. That's what we work with.
What I'm thinking of for a quick second, though, is, say, patent information. If I take the guts of the patent information, the document, and rework it, or do rewrite, or you let chat do rewrite, am I violating the patent or the copyright?
I don't work in the patent office. I'm not an expert in intellectual property law.
You just pass information.
Well, I want to hit 2 points there. First, on the intellectual property side, basically, if you're going to go out and file a new patent, you're going to go look at the patent topography and try to go to an area of the swimming pool that there's not a lot of activity. You'll have a better chance at being able to get a provisional through, regardless of what the source of the inspiration was. That's not up to the inventor to deal with. That's up to the patent regulator that does the patent award. But getting back to chat and kind of the impact that it's not only had on our, all of our lives in terms of being able to transform a very, very important utility, and that is the ability to search for information. Chat and OpenAI do have a responsibility to make sure that the data sources that are being used in these collective models are coming from vetted sources. And the ability to literally put a digital footprint, or fingerprint, I should say, and be able to validate that should come at the point of origin, so that in any point of reference during the way that these summations are done on chat and other generative protocols, it's very, very hard sometimes to be able to kind of create the gateway without impending the innovation. And we need to be able to kind of let this technology run its course, but observe it. And we see a lot of initiatives that are going on, both through government institutions as well as other people that think that AI is out of control and it's running amok. It's not really running amok. It's very, very controlled, but it all comes down to where that data is being derived from. And if there is a source on that data, at a minimum, it needs to be referenced, and you need to be able to kind of create source attribution at the front and back that kind of bends the border sometimes of global digital millennium copyright act stuff that all the publishers have to be able to deal with in terms of being able to kind of provide the source of that information.
Yeah, so I think that brings up an interesting sort of chicken and egg problem when it comes to having automated systems that are able to validate the source of information, because there's a protocol being developed called the Decentralized Identity Protocol. It's DID, and it essentially allows anybody to come along and post a blockchain registered identity, and you could start publishing articles that are tied back to that blockchain identity. But what's to say that I'm not posing as the NSA just because I've published an identity on the blockchain that says I'm the NSA? And so that's where we need to have a good balance of controls to allow for a community of validators, if there are two identities that claim to be the same organization, to moderate these on-chain data structures, so that if someone comes on and says they're the NSA and creates a fake website that looks like the NSA, but then you have the real NSA that's also published a digital identity, you want there to be a sufficient mechanism for validating which one of those is the authentic NSA, so that when you have systems like AI that are surfacing data from these different sources, the automated systems themselves can differentiate between an imposter and the real actor.
Building on what you're saying, that's sort of something that we're struggling with. And an area of research that we really haven't figured out yet is combining blockchain timestamping with PGP in order to say who created this information, or at least have some sort of evidence that a certain institution generated a piece of data.
Yeah, and I think it goes even back into kind of Web3 infrastructure and the opportunity for us to be able to connect and whitelist to those environments that we do trust. And I think the rest of the world is taking a cue from blockchain right now and trying to find different ways of being able to create, I would say, interoperability in being able to kind of access that through a single, access point.
How do you validate the first step of information, be it the voter, be it news, be it a court ruling? What are you doing for that now to make sure that initial piece of information is valid?
So we are connected to the source of the information where documents are being scanned. So once a document is scanned, it goes into a vote data entry system, and in parallel it goes to the SimpleProof system in order to capture it as close as possible to the origin. Right now, we're doing it, each hash is included in at least 4 Bitcoin transactions, but we know which Bitcoin addresses generated those accounts. So in a way, it's traceable, but I think once we scale and have more customers, at a certain point, it's going to be important to have a customer have a specific ID, and that's why we're looking at PGP to have those signatures.
Can I ask him? Has there been any, I would say, discrepancies between the ledger data as well as through the kind of the audit trail that goes through the electoral process?
Nope, worked perfectly.
Aligned, excellent.
Well, and I think some of that goes back to how early we are in the adoption of these systems. It worked perfectly today because there probably aren't enough threat actors with reasonable enough incentive to try to attack those systems, right? But if there was someone who could attack those systems and scan in a bunch of documents purporting to be the Guatemalan government, how does an individual or a computer system validate which of those two identities is the true Guatemalan government?
The address, the Bitcoin address that generated that transaction. So in order to generate a Bitcoin transaction, you need to sign it. And so the signature is the private piece.
And so that goes back to the Guatemalan government publishing the public key of that address to prove that they are the real Guatemalan government. But as a bad actor, I could set up a website that is a exact copy of the Guatemalan government website and say that this is my public key, and then how is someone supposed to differentiate between my fake Guatemalan government website and the Bitcoin key that I've published there and the one published on the true Guatemalan government website?
Right now, and that's a security issue, DNS is the only way to say, okay, well, you go to the official government website, and that website is owned by the government, right? And that's where the information is published. But you're right, that is an issue.
Look, we've seen a lot of authentication layers kind of go into that process to create the validation, and we believe that blockchain in itself can provide that connectivity point to be able to kind of validate our perceived trust in what's on the other side of that engagement or access to that database.
And I also think that the traceability and transparency that the blockchain brings to the equation can also help with that, because in the example I was kind of concocting there, the real Guatemalan government could take action against the imposter, and that action could be ledgered on the chain as well, so that you could actually sort of audit, how much activity has gone into sort of correcting falsehoods on the chain, and that could be accounted for within the authentication of an identity.
It happened already.
Yeah.
So a political party that lost the election took a screenshot of the SimpleProof verification site and changed some numbers on it, and they were like
a wallet address for an ICO.
They were blasted on Twitter, like a bunch of people, and like people that I didn't even know, that I don't know. That's what makes me happy, because people that I don't know are already using the system, and they know that they can find truthful information there. And so they blasted this party and like attacked them and told them like, no, it's fake information. And so that was discredited.
Yeah, can the government censor that information? Can they stop it? Is there a regulation available to stop the bad actors who post?
There is a law against, it's called delitos electorales, electoral delitos, like crimes. So if you publish fake information, then it can be, it has a criminal consequence.
A legal impact.
Yeah.
I think at a data level, it's really hard to enforce those kinds of things. Like once the data is there on the chain, it's really hard to remove it. And so if, in the example like infringing content, that can start to be an issue, especially if there's enough infringing content on a specific network. You could have a sort of coalition of corporations that sort of try to force a government to act. And an example of how a government could potentially act to intermediate in blockchain events is like if you have a number of blockchain nodes being hosted in a centralized infrastructure like AWS or Azure, and the government steps in and forces that corporation to take those nodes offline, that can introduce a lack of security to that specific protocol. But that's also where certain protocols have reached a broad enough level of decentralization, like the Bitcoin protocol, where you have private data centers that are enforcing the security of that protocol, so that if someone like AWS or AWS and Azure go offline and all their Bitcoin nodes are offline, you still have a secure network because there are enough private data structures with computing power to provide the security required. But you still want to have structures at a protocol level that allow for addressing some of those issues, because otherwise it can sort of discredit the protocol itself, and that can provide, can create other issues for the protocol.
Hello? Okay. I think, Tor hasn't gone away, right? The Onion network has not gone away. It's still being used, and I'm sure all the agencies that are out there that are looking to be able to do authentic auditing on kind of that environment, it's always about following the money trail. And what we're talking about is following the data trail. And the ability today, especially to be able to do deep forensics in real time using AI and kind of other tools, have brought certain companies, like Elliptical and CyberTrace, to be used across these extremely large big data environments that are being challenged all the time for nefarious characters to be able to try to go in and effectuate, I would say, the illusion of something that can be audited and at the same time can cost large companies billions of dollars, not only in balance sheet stuff, but reputational risk when they're kind of attached to a security vulnerability in their environment. So I think the responsibility really comes back upon trying to push the monitoring systems in a way to be able to identify, anomalies early on before they can actually, spin out of control.
What happens when it spins out of control? What happens when the elections have more results than they should have, or the court orders don't work? What's the value of the blockchain in that? Dan?
Well, I think that the value of the blockchain today is that there are evolutions to these protocols that can happen that provide for measures to counteract those types of situations. Like what we're working on at Jurat is the ability to have blockchain systems actually integrate with court systems, so that if there are rulings to say peel back a number of election votes because they're found to be fraudulent through some reliable mechanism, the blockchain can automatically freeze those transactions and roll them back. Whereas in systems without those same controls, you have a much larger challenge in terms of sort of scrubbing the data that's illegitimate. And I think that's one step in the right direction, but I still think there are a lot of additional controls, and there needs to be a balance within those controls as they're rolled out to make sure that they're not controlled by one entity, or a group of entities can't come together and collude to, modify the data in their favor, essentially.
The approach that we're taking at SimpleProof, we don't want to replace government systems, rip them out and change it with a new blockchain technology. We just want to be able to record changes and record new documents that are generated by that system. So if there's a change in the state of the, some registry database, that change can be recorded in an immutable manner on the blockchain. So the blockchain, our system is working in parallel. It's not going to replace the government system, but it's just recording any changes. So to keep evidence of any modifications, because ripping out a government system, I feel, is going to be very complicated. It's going to be a huge task, and they change constantly. Like you mentioned, like, okay, we need to reverse some transaction. Well, if it's legal to reverse any decision or whatever, do it, but just record it in an immutable manner so there's evidence that happened.
I think you also need to take a phased-in approach towards being able to deploy some of these technologies, especially across things that are under high scrutiny with a lot of eyes on them all the time, to be able to get after the truth. The electoral process is the exact same kind of way. We're talking about digital shards now on voting registration, right, that need to be held under a microscope if necessary, but not to impede the process for that smooth transition of power, no matter where it may lead in terms of the way that the U.S. kind of approaches the electoral process. But we know that this is not a perfect world, and the technology is not perfect. But getting the regulators comfortable with being able to have these audit trails set up, that if something is being contested and it is a small amount, we can measure that down to the micro level, which again, traditional systems just can't do that, even on ledger technologies that are not perfect.
Yeah, I think the blockchain cannot apply the rule of law. The rule of law needs to be applied by people and the government. And so the blockchain is just going to be a source of evidence and immutable proof of changes in system or decisions or any type of information that's generated in a public manner. But at the end of the day, it has to be, people need to, the law will be applied, and you have a court system, you have juries, and so that's not going to be replaced by blockchain. That's my opinion. But just a better way of recording the truth and recording evidence.
So I just wanted to touch on something that Rafael mentioned, because I definitely agree that these systems need to adapt to the systems that are already in place, especially when it comes to things like governments and courts and things like that. And that's where having features within these systems that allow them to read from the existing government and judicial systems that exist for these types of rulings is important, because especially in something like government and judicial systems, you're not going to get those to change, especially at the rate of innovation that's happening in the blockchain space. And so by having blockchain technologies that can interface with the systems that already record the outcomes of those types of rulings, we can strike a balance between providing some level of governance to these blockchain systems while still allowing them to integrate with the systems that are ultimately decided by people and jurors and judges and things like that.
You need to be able to query that data in a way that, in a non-programming language, right? So that a user can do that. And I think this is kind of where the convergence now between AI and kind of blockchain and Web3 really meets a very interesting opportunity to be able to query this with trained models that are there for specific purposes and for specific applications. Those anomalies there are, again, could be apparent and could be recognized, and we need to have the right listening system set up to be able to kind of do that, where a person, I'm not saying that we're not normal, but a normal person would be able to kind of go to a computer and ask it, or go to their mobile phone and ask a question of that chain data that kind of delivers whatever the output is going to be in some sort of readable format.
And building up on what you said, I've been working with governments for the past 10 years, doing technology projects, and what we see is a lot of document processes, so systems like BPM systems, content management systems, document systems, all these types of applications that implement business processes within the bureaucratic areas of government. We at SimpleProof, what we build is a simple way to integrate. So you want to integrate your BPM system and generate immutable evidence from changes to documents. It's an easy plug and play API. So that's I think the first wave of adoption that's going to be coming in government, just recording information, and then we can move to decentralized tokens and all that stuff.
Interesting discussions. So I'm going to ask a few questions to see if anybody in the audience, Eugene, please.
Thank you very much. I have a question for you, please, Daniel. You may or may not know, my name is Eugene Morz. I represent Devote, Gauche, and Everscale network in GBA. About 2.5 years ago, the recipient of GBA Courage Award, Carlos Torriello from Guatemala, worked with us to build a system to safeguard what's called Acta Cuatro, specifically for Guatemala elections. And we built such a system using crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. We have a great product called D-Audit. But then Carlos disappeared, and we were unable to find him either through GBA or through Fiscal Digital organization. Do you know anything what happened to him and how we can get back? Thank you.
He's after the business.
Lives in the mempool. I don't know.
I have a question, actually. You've been talking about government documents, but you could expand this discussion to individuals. So an example of a censorship-resistant communication platform was a platform called Voice, where a person had to prove who they were before they could even post to it. And then it was a combination Twitter, Medium, Substack type thing. It failed simply because there was no users in the end. Are you afraid, or what are your thoughts about the adoption of this technology and then its resulting use case? I mean, simply because you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it.
I'm very happy with how it's coming along. We didn't do any advertising, no marketing, no PR before this project. And now I've seen podcasts of individual people that I have never met talking about how blockchain is safeguarding elections information. You see a lot of Twitter spaces, Twitter threads that individual citizens, not everyone, because not everyone understands blockchain technology, but a lot of people who are nerds like us and are interested in this, they are becoming sort of activists in this. And so, in a sense, and my hope is that this new way of doing, of safeguarding elections information becomes embedded in sort of the election ceremony, the way that elections are run. For example, we have a great picture where the magistrates of the elections tribunal have SimpleProof in a screen in the back, and they're showing the documents that are being stored on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that, I think that once it comes sort of ingrained in the culture and in the way of doing things, then that's how it's going to get adopted.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I also think that what you had mentioned earlier also applies here too. It's like it's all part of the adoption arc of new technologies. Just like 20 years ago when the internet was first coming around and people thought it was just for government agencies and institutions, and people thought it was insane to think that we would have it in our pockets and be able to talk to people on the other side of the planet with a few taps of a finger. That has now evolved to a point where we all have it in our pocket right here sitting in this room. And I think blockchain technology is in the same place that internet technology was like 20 years ago, where right now it may be only for nerds and we might need to build more systems to make it easy to surface data and find it, but those systems are being built like by the people here on this stage today. And so in 1, 3, 5 years, there's going to be a very different conversation going around blockchain technology, rather than it being only for nerds or it being hard to surface data. There are going to be applications that you have in your pocket that are powered by blockchain technology that you ultimately don't even need to know what a blockchain is or the fact that blockchain technology is behind the scenes. You know that because cryptography is ultimately powering your experience, that the data is secure and can be trusted, and there are transparent mechanisms to validate that data. And it's just a matter of time before we get to that point.
I think also there's a consumer confidence issue, that the melding between tokens and crypto and kind of the dark side of kind of blockchain and so forth like that has kind of infiltrated the confidence in the underlying technology, which again is something that is very, very difficult to shake if you want to be able to kind of drive large-scale adoption. We still don't have the killer app there that is completely interoperable, that proves who we are, that can act essentially as an environment where we hold and protect and own that digital information that we not only create, but that we want to share with the world.
My name is Dmitry Levkin, Basely Partners. I would like to ask if you have a possible recourse against the bad actors on the side of those who have skills and know the law. For example, one of our clients faced with such a barrier that someone already filed a patent, which is like a general method of cryptographic protection. And those who tried to enter the market with their technology already faced that patent is already filed, and they faced with lawsuits based on the patent issued by US government already. But the patent itself has like behind the method, which is very general. What are your thoughts about possible recourse against those bad actors?
So I think it depends on the level of adoption that certain systems have started to provide for blockchain ledgers being the ultimate source of truth of who the publisher of that original patent is. So for your example, where that patent, say, has been issued to a blockchain and it infringes on the true author's work, having a blockchain that integrates with court systems so that the true author can sue the original publisher and the blockchain can take into consideration the ruling of a judicial system that says that the initial item published to the blockchain is legitimate and the original author actually has the rights to that work, and so roll back the ledger transactions that initially published the infringing patent on the blockchain and allow the author to publish the true patent on the blockchain is something that most blockchains today don't have good support for, but it is a clear need that has been identified in the market and something that blockchains and other organizations are working towards providing.
How long do you anticipate for that sort of technology to be there to validate and be able to track down across the board? Not just for, forgive me as I say it like this, not just for elections, which has a certain need for integrity, but for a broader market in the folks who want to deal with blockchain?
I think that technology is already here. The problem is that it's not well known or well adopted yet. Like, you can put your data on a variety of different blockchains and you can publish your fingerprint to say that this is my identity. And so if you see stuff published by this identity on a blockchain, it is really me. But having normal people understand how to use those systems and what the hell is even a fingerprint that I'm talking about, there's probably a handful of people that understand that, and making it something that is as easy as logging into an app and seeing my profile on that app, but understanding that my profile is backed by cryptographically secured blockchain data is still sort of that chasm that we have to cross.
That's to be expected. How about in Guatemala, Rafael?
We did elections first because that is public information that people are very passionate about. So I think that was a very good use case for the technology, but it's just a way to prove that it works. We want to, we're working with, for example, a banking regulator that has hundreds of thousands of contracts that people sign for their credit cards or to open a bank account, and they want that information stored using SimpleProof. And so we're using more, those are the boring use cases, and I think that's where it's going to happen. But first, you need to prove it with the information that protects democracy, the information that really, enables government to exist because the will of the people, because people choose it. So that's why we went with elections. But I think, for example, that's one we're working on, like a banking regulator. Another is lawyers have in Guatemala a protocol, their official paper that they write that they have to submit to an archive. Right. And so those documents can also go on SimpleProof, and then nobody can edit them. So that's more like what we're seeing in the future. Another thing is integrating with, for example, photocopiers. So when you scan a document, you press scan or send to email, timestamp. That could be just another option on the photocopier. So that's more in the future. We haven't started that, but that's I think that's how it's going to get adopted.
Go ahead, Dan.
An earlier question asked about the personal use cases for this type of technology and traceability related to that, and they were talking about a matrix of social identities that are used to prove your identity, or used to prove your authenticity on the blockchain, essentially. It's interesting because there's actually a recent blockchain protocol called Worldcoin that some of you may have heard of. It's started by Sam Altman, who's the AI guy. Basically what they did was they had this thing called an orb, which instead of using a matrix of social accounts to validate your identity, they actually scan your iris at different locations around the world. And they had a pretty surprising turnout for these things, where they had thousands of people lining up to get their iris scanned and to receive their blockchain identity in exchange for like $30 of Worldcoin, which is worth like $20 today or something like that. And so if you can get thousands of people to show up for $30 to get a validated blockchain identity in today's market, imagine where we'll be in 5 years when you can actually have it in your pocket and it's not such a bespoke thing, and you can also be incentivized with a level of incentive that you don't potentially question, because there are a lot of headlines that really try to smear blockchain when ultimately it comes back to user responsibility. And I think that is just an example of how the space is evolving in terms of, providing proof of a specific sort of warm body identity behind a digital identity. And that's just, one of the first steps that's being taken in that kind of space.
And, just to complement that a little bit, as the technology itself is being adopted in ways, also the anomaly detection systems and the listeners that are out there are also in a position to be able to identify real people from bots, especially across the social network place. Yeah. Now, this yields a tremendous amount of, I would say, concern for people that are in the influencer market that are using bot farms, essentially, to be able to kind of go drive not only information, but we can see that infiltrating public policy and kind of, I would say, some people that are on the other side that are looking to either confuse other people or pass bad information out through those networks.
Do you have a question?
So Hey everybody, my name is Alexander. I'm with web3domains.com. So we actually spend a lot of our time focusing on digital identity, personal identities, things of that nature, such as ENS. I'm pretty sure you've heard of that. But really wanted to ask, what are some possible solutions or like the best solutions that you're seeing out right now for digital identities? Like, do we need some sort of KYC? I know you mentioned Worldcoin, which is awesome answer. You mentioned DNS, validators. Do we need to validate the validators? Like, what are the best solutions that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I'll go first here. I think the best solution that I'm aware of is definitely the decentralized identity protocol that's being developed. So if you go to identity.foundation online, you can read more about it. But it's essentially a coalition of companies that have come together. It was started by Microsoft like 2 or 3 years ago. And they've all come together to basically form a specification for how this data can be formatted and stored on decentralized ledgers so that when information is published, whether it be on the Bitcoin blockchain or on Ethereum with an ENS, you can validate who that identity is, who the original author of that work is. And it's being developed to a government level specification. So you'll see in a lot of Customs and Border Patrol type use cases, DIDs, which stand for Decentralized Identity Documents, starting to become part of the sort of core vocabulary of these organizations because they're, believe it or not, places like Homeland Security are actually trying to utilize this technology to reduce frictions when it comes to specifically Customs and Border Patrol type scenarios. So when you're going through an airport, rather than having to present them with a passport that a human is trying to validate and make sure the picture is not fake and the text hasn't been modified and all the different things that you can essentially fake with a passport, you will instead get a digital passport that's rooted to a blockchain that a government has issued you. And so I think that when it comes to authenticating individual identity, one of the most respected systems for that is the government. So it starts with the government issuing you a digital identity. And there are actually governments that have started to do this. Like in Canada, Ontario has a system where they're issuing digital identities to their individual users, and banks are now accepting those digital identities and providing them with a bank account. And when a bank account is issued against a decentralized identity, it becomes what's called a credential that you actually store in your wallet, so that when you go to like a cellular phone provider and they say to start an account, you need to have a bank account, you can prove that you have a bank account in a decentralized manner without them having to talk to the bank or pay to be an enterprise customer of the bank to surface that data. They can essentially just look at the blockchain and validate that in your wallet you have a credential from an institution that is registered as a financial institution, and then they'll grant you a cellular account, and that cellular account then also becomes a credential in your wallet, and the ecosystem then starts to build out like that.
How long is it going to take, though, to create a secondary marketplace for digital identities?
Oh, I'm sure it already exists.
Yeah, well.
Okay. Thank you, guys. And we're a little bit over time, which happens all the time.